back to his home. And that in-car drive was recorded. They have cameras in the cars. They have cameras in their cars, and they reported them driving him home, but they did not record him making the statement that Lieutenant Holman thinks is so damaging. Also, on October 26th, when Mr. Allen was put in handcuffs and taken to jail, that was also recorded. But not the one where he said it doesn't matter, it's over. Mr. Baldwin asked, did he find Betsy Blair credible? He says, yes, he did. And Mr. Baldwin asked, are you aware that she had described a vehicle that didn't look like Richard Allen's car in a place where Richard Allen's car was supposed to be? Yeah, he's aware of that. So they clarify that Mr. Allen's car, the question is, Mr. Allen's car had to be at the CPS lot at 1:30 for your theory to be correct. And he expresses confusion. We have to explain this. We have to explain what this means, that having a timeline means that the evidence needs to take a timeline. You've got to spell this out a little bit. He's acting very confused. So Mr. Baldwin explains the theory is that his car was parked at that lot at 1:30. According to Mr. Holman, I don't know where he parked. And Lieutenant Holman said, well, there were witnesses who said they saw a car matching the description of his car in that lot. So are we at that lot or not at that lot? Getting confused now. There were people who described cars in that area. Mr. Baldwin asked, who are they? Yeah, because we haven't heard from them in this trial. Who are the people that say there's a 2016 black Ford Focus parked in the CPS lot between 1:30 and 3:30 on February 13th, 2017? Not a single person has testified to that. Who are these people? Lieutenant Holman says Betsy Blair. Mr. Baldwin points out she described the 1965 Mercury Comet. He asked Lieutenant Holman if Lieutenant Holman found Sarah Carbach credible, and he said that he did. Mr. Baldwin asked, were you in the courtroom while she testified? He was. Do you still think so? Yeah. Yeah, he does. Don't know if the jury is going to be on the same page as Lieutenant Holman with that one. Hard to say. But she really did not do herself favors with how she testified. Lieutenant Holman agreed that Sarah was the only person who saw the guy walking down the street, that nobody else reported a muddy and bloody guy. Mr. Baldwin asks, this is a busy road, isn't it? It's 300 North. Lots of people use this road back and forth. I mean, we've certainly heard testimony to that effect. We heard about how even Sarah Carbach, if we accept her testimony, she kept driving past the lot, the parking lot for the trails, to see how busy it was, and there were always cars there. We heard But there were lots of people out on the trails this day because it was a beautiful, unseasonably warm day. Bree Wilmer told us that Rayleigh Voorhees was saying hi to all of these people that they met on the trail. And that it stood out that this man that they saw down near Freedom Ridge, the reason why it stood out is that unlike everybody else they'd said hi to, he didn't say hi. He didn't react. He didn't respond. So we know there's lots of people out there. It's a busy road, isn't it? Mr. McWheelan objects to the foundation. Are you familiar with the traffic patterns of Carroll County? And have you done a traffic survey in Carroll County and done any traffic studies in this area? Your Honor, I object. He's no foundation. There's no foundation for him to have any knowledge of the traffic patterns on 300 County Road North. That's sustained. At this point, Mr. McWheeland is also starting to look desperate. He looks like he is swinging for the fences and badly missing. He is putting out airball after airball. Oh, it's getting sustained, but the jury is seeing this happen as if the only way that you can say whether it's a busy road, when you get to have enough expertise to testify about how touching your face means you're lying, but you can't. You need a foundation. You can't use basic common sense and what we've heard throughout this case to have an opinion about whether 300 North is a kind of busy road. The jury is seeing all this. The only way you know that is a traffic study. I mean, this looked ridiculous. It really did. It was not a good look.
It's Miss Adrian Burkhart, famous lawyer.
It's a good point.
I'm doing dishes, babysitting a dog.
This is a busy road.
And
somebody who supposedly is covered in blood because they just murdered 2 girls is walking down this busy road in the middle of the day in plain daylight. Okay, number 1, that's pretty ridiculous. And number 2, nobody else saw him. We know the cameras didn't see him. So this is a good point. And it's not a difficult point to get. So the jury is seeing this. And this is not a good look for the state. Mr. Baldwin points out, you saw the traffic patterns from watching the Hoosier, I keep saying that, the Hoosier Harvest Store video. Such a tongue twister. Nope, that doesn't give him the foundation because it was other people that watched it. Other people watched. He didn't personally watch it with his own eyes, so no idea. No idea how many cars drive on 300 North. Mr. Baldwin asked how many vehicles were traveling on that Hoosier Harvest Store video. I don't know. He doesn't know. Convenient that he doesn't know. That's opportunistic ignorance. That one. This is the lead investigator. There's a rule that sometimes gets applied when you're talking. It's usually when you're dealing with search warrants. It's not like a hearsay rule. It's just in terms of what police officers can use when they're applying for a search warrant. It's called the fellow officer rule because, yeah, it's not always the same person that's talking to the witness or doing the groundwork that writes the affidavit. So they get to rely on the information that the other officers provide them. Fellow officer rule. Pretty, it irritates me sometimes, but it makes sense. And so, we're to believe that the lead investigator of this shocking murder that devastated this town Didn't really know what the other investigators were doing, what they looked at. Yeah, this is also not a good look. Because either you're lying or you didn't care enough about this investigation. Because you should know. You should know. You should care about every single thing that your investigators are doing. You're the top. You're where all of this information gets filtered through. You should know it all. So you're lying that you don't, or you didn't belong in this role because you didn't care to do the job. Mr. Baldwin asked, how tall is the Monon High Bridge? And he said he didn't know. Mr. Baldwin asked, would it be prudent to measure it? Lieutenant Holman says somebody did. It's somewhere, it's somewhere in the information. He asked if Lieutenant Holman had been down to the end where the girls were abducted. And he said, yes, he has. And asked if, to get down to the creek, you would have to go down, you have to go down to the access road, and then to get down to the creek, even further beyond that. At this point, we don't know where he's going because Mr. McClellan again objects to it being
Sophie
beyond the
is
scope
very
and that
mad
is
at me
sustained.
because I refuse to
So we
give her
switch
any
gears,
treats.
and we go back to the time of the
Her owners said no treats.
Lieutenant
So
Holman
she has
confirms
not been happy today.
that law enforcement's theory, what they believe is that after Richard Allen left the scene at sometime between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, he never returned to it. And so what we did here is establish some things, some foundational things that I suspect they're going to come back. We can kind of already have had a hint of what it is. But their theory, he confirms, going down the Primrose Path, that under their theory, Richard Allen did not take Libby's phone and bring it back. In fact, her phone helped establish the timeline that was used for the probable cause. He pointed out that Richard Allen did not sell his Ford Focus. He did not sell his gun, his clothing. He didn't get rid of anything. So his phone that was used to help establish probable cause, he didn't take that. He didn't get rid of any of the incriminating stuff. And they agreed. Libby's phone line would give a good timeline of the events of the day. And then they believed it would implicate Richard Allen, and they believed that data is accurate and reliable. This is foundational because what this is saying is that there is something in that data that's going to come out in the defense
it
case.
up like a vulture.
It's going to be,
So I can't.
at best, not helpful to the state. So the state's concession that this data is accurate and reliable, that's why he's pinning them down
No
to this.
treats.
So that later on, when they can show
Strict orders
data
from the owner.
does not support the state's theory, there's
No
stuff
human food. Excuse me.
He points out that Anna Spath and Riley Voorhees were both, this was a group of 4 girls. But Richard Allen said he saw 3 people when he was on the trail.
for one Higginbottom, I am
At the
not waking
time,
her up.
he believed that Libby's phone had shut down on
Just lay
February the
down.
13th.
I ain't
But
waking
now
her up.
he knows that that was wrong. We haven't gotten into the details about why he knows that was wrong, but now he knows. Mr. Baldwin asks if he believes there is only one perpetrator. And he says now he does. Now he believes there's only one. At one point, he thought maybe it was more than one, but he changed his mind because based on his experience, when multiple people are involved with a crime, usually one of them will tell. And he bases that on his experience with drug cases.
Excuse me.
Mr. Baldwin asks, are you equating what people might do in a drug case, a drug dealing case,
Drug
with
dealing.
this murder
Wow.
of two girls? And Lieutenant Holman says, absolutely. Absolutely thinks those are the same thing that an addict who has gotten busted and is eager for his fix and is being told
All right, sweetie, you lay down.
things will go well
You're
for him
tired.
if he gives up his supplier. So he does, and he walks out of that police station. That's the same thing as somebody implicating themselves in a double murder. Absolutely. Those are the same thing, according to Lieutenant Herman. Mr. Baldwin asks, you believe that one person in 1 hour got the girls across the creek, got them undressed, got them murdered, got them redressed, got them posed, got the sticks on them, etc., etc. Yes, one person in 1 hour did all of those things. Mr. Baldwin asks, would you agree it would be easier if there were two people? Lieutenant Holman says no. No, I don't think I would agree it would be easier for two people to do that. Is that a reasonable denial? That it would be an easier thing for two people to accomplish all of these tasks than for one person? Are we not to use our brains here? The jury will be instructed that they are not to leave their common sense at the courthouse door. They are more than entitled and in fact should bring it into the jury room for deliberations. This is just beginning to reek of somebody who is accustomed to not being questioned, to not being challenged, to their word being the end of it. And so the very prospect that the jury might not just accept
It was not
what he
Amish
says, and what he
ritual. There ain't
thinks,
even hardly
and
any
adopt that as
Amish
their
down
own
there in
belief,
Belfast.
and call it a day and send Mr. Allen off to prison for life, he doesn't seem to know how to cope with that. Because this is not a reasonable denial. This is highly unreasonable.
Do not upset Sophia.
Of course.
She is sleeping.
Of course, it would be easier for two people to do it. And that's not a hard concession to make. Yes, it would be easier, but that doesn't mean that that's what happened. People do hard things all the time. Lieutenant Holman agreed that he believed Libby was killed at the tree. I believe they're talking about the F tree, some distance from where her body was found. So this is a detail of the theory that we are hearing this in trial for the first time. Law enforcement doesn't believe she was killed right where she was and then, came to rest in that location. They believe that at a bare minimum, she was killed some feet away and then moved to where she was found. But there are no drag marks, right? We've seen the photos of the crime scene. We've heard the testimony from the crime scene investigators and the first responders and the people at the search party.
Folks,
From
make
the
sure you
DNR
check
officer
out
who
a great
went back to the
lawyer,
scene and found
defense lawyer,
six.
all-around lawyer, Miss Andrea Burkhart.
According to Lieutenant Holman, there are drag marks.
I
Yes, there
also
are
am a
drag
son
marks.
to
They're
her.
hard to see.
Great lady. Very smart,
They are
very
there,
intelligent.
but they're not from the tree. There just aren't drag marks from the tree.
They're not drag marks from the tree. Very interesting. Not just that. Interesting.
Mr. Baldwin points out, shouldn't we have heard testimony about these drag marks? Lieutenant, well, he doesn't know. I don't know if you should or not. Mr. Baldwin points out,
Hello, babies.
wouldn't it be easier? You have one person uses a knife on her at a tree, some distance, moving her to a location, probably have to drag her, whereas two people would be able to pick her up and move her, not make drag marks. Great point. Yeah, this is a good point. How did one person move her? Two people would be able to do that. Mr. Holman, he does not agree. He doesn't agree that two people could pick her up and move her and not leave drag marks. Mr. Baldwin asked if they could analyze the height of the person on the bridge. Lieutenant Holman said that they tried. They tried to do that. But the cost to do that was $10,000. What have they spent on this trial? That they made a point of getting out there in the press to be reported about the cost to Carroll County of this case. 4 point how many millions? 4 point how many millions? And they want to bring up 10,000 to investigate a pretty important detail, the identity of Bridge Guy, and something that might narrow it down. Well, Lieutenant Holman says, no, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't the money. The problem was the accuracy. They could only get it within about 2 inches. I went back and looked at what the description of Bridge Guy was that police released to the public. They released a description of Bridge Guy that said he was between 5'6" and 5'10". A 4-inch discrepancy. And they have a problem with the accuracy of this other method. So they won't spend $10,000 out of the 4 point whatever million to investigate that.
I wonder who
At some
pocketed
point,
that 1.4
when you're not
million.
investigating something, it's because you don't want to know. It's because you don't want to know. This is why I talked about this before. There's a reason why nobody asks these witnesses, the eyewitnesses, the ones who saw who they say is Bridge Guy out on the trails. There's a reason why nobody asks those witnesses. Bridge Guy, that guy sitting there at the defense team. Because they don't want the answer. The investigators didn't want the answer. They thought they already had their guy, and more information could undermine their case. Mr. Baldwin points out if it was a taller person or something that would work. Right? If it establishes that he's like an unusual height, then it would be worth it. This is essentially what he's saying. We've seen the photo. I mean, it seems unlikely that Bridge Guy is unusually tall, but he certainly doesn't look short. Abby and Lindy are both 5'4". Richard Allen, about 5'4". Bridge Guy walking up the bridge behind Abby looks quite a bit bigger. They didn't do that because 10,000 and accuracy. It would be more accurate than their existing description, but not accurate enough to spend $10,000. Mr. Baldwin asked, Richard Allen's a short guy, right? He's a short guy? Jerry Holman's answer, I don't know how tall he is. Not an expert on shortness. Apparently they never covered that in his training and experience. Whether somebody is short or not. You need a foundation. You need an actual measurement, just like we need a traffic study to know about the patterns on County Road 300 North. It's starting to become evident.
It's okay, sweetie.
That,
Go back to bed.
This witness is just resistant. He's resistant to common sense. A short guy, really? You can't give an opinion on whether he's a short guy. He knew that there was human hair in Abby's hand by October 26th when he did this interview, this interrogation. But he had been told it was a female and probably a family member. He knew that he only needed a swab from Kelsey or a swab from Becky in order to confirm it, but he didn't ask for it to be tested. And his explanation is because they had resources, it would take resources that they wanted to put elsewhere, and they didn't have a female suspect. So they didn't bother. Okay, got this? This was an important little slip here. They didn't test it because they didn't have the suspect. Is there a problem with the order of those events and how investigations are supposed to go? He has just told us. Investigating the hair in Abby's hand is not something that they would do to develop a lead, to follow that information to a conclusion. He told us only once they have a suspect. Why? Because they're only looking to confirm what they already believe. pain. They didn't test it because they didn't have the system. He concedes there was no DNA of Richard Allen at the crime scene. There was no DNA of the victims in his home or in his car. Mr. Baldwin asks if leaving behind the bloody sticks at the scene was a mistake, and Jerry Holman says no, it was not a mistake. The sticks had been observed, and the crime scene investigators decided to. Nothing to see here. He did eventually acknowledge that there were mistakes, but it was only on the level of Mr. Baldwin pointing out, at the very least, there are some typos in some of the reports. We heard about that from the computer forensic analysis, that guy, about how he had transposed some of the numbers in his report. He had a few typos, little things he had to correct. That's the level of mistake that Mr. Holman was willing to accept responsibility for. These other failures, doesn't seem like he's willing to accept any responsibility for that. Where does the buck stop in this town? I gotta wonder. Nobody's to blame for any of the mistakes. Everybody's pointing their finger. Even the judge, even the clerk, filing the documents in CMS. Where's the leadership? Do they even know what that means? At this point, Mr. Baldwin requested a sidebar. And when he came back, he asked, "You were aware of the sticks on the girls,
Miss Debbie.
And it's your belief
Happy birthday.
that he was trying to camouflage the bodies."
Happy
He said he's trying to conceal, but Lieutenant Holmes is trying to camouflage the bodies. And so Mr. Baldwin then confirms, you don't believe there was a pattern to how they were placed. You believe they were just random.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for being a part of my channel. I just got done doing dishes. Sophie is
He says the
sleeping.
individual took time to lay 3 sticks on Abby.
And we are listening to Miss Andrea Burkhart, the Delphi
position. This is a bit strange. He acknowledges they were moved. At least Libby, we just heard him testify to that.
Debbie, she is very upset because
Libby is killed
her
in the
owner
tree.
does not want me giving her any treats. I feel
Not
so
where she
bad
was
for
at.
her.
But
She
they were
did
opposed.
get one potato chip, fell on the floor, and before I could do anything, it was gone.
He acknowledged there were no fingerprints. And he pointed out one of the features of this crime scene that is one of the big standouts.
Debbie, I don't know actually what they have because they don't
It's one of the reasons why
have to
there's so
say
many
anything
questions
until
about
court.
what really happened
So
here.
they
and why
might
it's
have
very
more evidence.
difficult for
They
me
might not.
to believe the state's theory that this is just an opportunistic, everyday murder. And that's the fact that Abby's hands were clean, pristine, while Libby's were bloody. They both suffered the same injuries. We heard the testimony from the medical examiner about the instinct to cover that up, to apply the pressure, to try to stop the flow. And we heard from the medical examiner that Libby would have passed into unconsciousness and death much sooner than Abby. But Abby's hands were pristine. Oh, because of what? The defense is going somewhere with this. I mean, I know from the pre-trial, they're trying to get us towards the Odinism stuff. Their theory is that this was a ritualistic killing, and therefore there is a ritualistic explanation for why Abby is pristine and Libby is not. But I'm just very surprised that these questions were asked, that Judge Gold allowed these questions to be asked, unless somehow
It might not be, Debbie. I'm more interested to see
Mr. Baldwin
if
asked
they came to
if
me
from
and
the crime
said,
scene
listen,
location, you definitely
we
hear
got
people on the
26
bridge.
phones on that
Mr.
on them
McMillan
phones.
objected to that.
We found young
That's
girls
speculation, and
and
that was sustained.
him
At
trolling
this
accounts,
point, Mr.
whatever.
Pullman, this is like the first
Drug
time
dealing,
in quite a while I've
whatever.
seen him look
Right.
at the jury.
If they
Now, in
came and
fairness,
said, hey,
as you know, I have been
we
I had
lost
my
the
head down,
Delphi case on
ran, with
the murders,
rapidly trying to
but
scribble
we
as
got
much
them
as I
on
can.
pedo stuff
It is
and
getting
other
very
stuff
difficult to hear. They are
connected
proceeding
to
quickly. I'm trying to get as much as I can, so I'm
Abby and
not,
Libby's death.
popping my eyes up to stare at him.
And that's
all
what a
the
lot of
time,
people
but
don't realize is
we're
even
having
if
a
these
very
guys
hard
ain't
time hearing because
He's answering the
being that they were luring them, they were underage girls,
so you've really got to
photos
stare
of
and
them,
try to get
whatever it
eyes
may
on
be.
him and try to supplement what you're hearing with your ears with what you can, try to lip read.
They could say they were the
So this
cause
is the
of the
first
death.
time
They
I
might not
saw
have done the
him
murders,
look over in the direction of the
but they
jury
were
in a
the
long
cause,
time,
and that would
he
bring
then
on.
looked down.
There's another
And I made that.
charge that they could do. I forget the name of it, Debbie, but where they can sue the family members of these guys that were suspects in the case and either luring them
We
or
restated
pedo.
his theory,
people
the
with
law enforcement
underage
theory of
photos.
the case, that Richard Allen heard people on the bridge from the search party, so he killed the girls and then he left. Jerry Holman says, well, I'm not sure about the order,
That's how they got O.J. Simpson.
but I believe he could have heard
And a
something.
couple
What he
other
means is the
murderers.
order
They
of
couldn't get him on murder,
the hearing,
so
hearing
the
something and
family
the killing.
sued him, and
This
they got him
doesn't
on
make-
wrongful
this doesn't
death
make
or
any
something like
sense at
that.
all.
He was the cause of it or
What we
something
were
like that.
told in the opening statement
Which
was that Richard Allen
he lost
wanted
everything.
to have his way with them. And then he was interrupted, he heard something, and that's why he killed them. Why did he kill them under Mr. Holman's theory if it's not because he heard something that scared him?
She is so relaxed, Debbie. She's been
We
so
know he
good
didn't
today.
have his way with
Although
them.
she has been
Well, I
stubborn.
guess we don't know that yet.
For the first half
We'll wait
hour she
until we
got
get the
her. She
DNA
barked,
analyst on the stand,
whined,
body fluids analyst, whoever tested all those swabs they
wanting
took.
a treat because I
But
babied
we
her.
know there's no
she
injury,
said.
no sign.
But I didn't cave in. I didn't do it. It's an 8-year rush to judgment.
And Mr. Baldwin points
Who
out
knows?
the search party wasn't there at 4 o'clock.
Does she look at peace,
The search
Debbie,
party
like she's
wasn't there until much
relaxed?
later. How could the search party have interrupted him?
She's got her
Mr.
little
Holman
tongue
says, well,
out.
I'm not sure if I thought it was the search
she's
party, I
relaxed.
meant the family. And Mr. Baldwin points out nobody got there until 4:30. I thought back about that testimony. That was Derek Derman's testimony. And so he had gotten to the trails at 3 o'clock, and they
She
weren't
looks
there.
like a
He
giant.
waited.
She looks like a
They
wolf.
weren't there, so we got out and walked a little
She
bit
looks like a little
around.
wolf.
Didn't see them. So he went back to his car, and then they started making the calls.
At least she does on camera, or a little fox.
It wasn't until
Her
much
face.
later when he was calling out, going out down to the stream, shouting their names.
I'm having
So
some
Mr.
tea.
Holmanen says there were people there before 3:57, which is the time, the bookend time, when Sarah Carbaugh reports seeing the muddy, bloody man on the road. So he insists there were people there before. Well, yes, that's true. There were people there. There were people there. Not searchers, though. Mr. Baldwin asked, didn't have any concerns that Betsy Blair provided an inaccurate description of the person she saw, and he said no. Same concerns about Sarah Carbaugh? No. No concerns about them providing an accurate description, even though that description doesn't match Richard Allen. On the video, Lieutenant Holman, he concedes that he doesn't see who says the words down the hill. And his belief is that they went down the hill to the right-hand side. So Mr. Baldwin says, you don't know if someone was off to the left. No, I don't think so. Mr. Baldwin asked, did you ever have a discussion about whether there could be two people at the end of the bridge? And he concedes, yes, that had been discussed, but there was nothing to indicate that there was more than one person there. Mr. Baldwin says, do you remember Teresa Wiegert? We haven't heard from Teresa Wiegert yet.
Debbie, this dog
Sounds like it may be
lives
significant.
better than me. If
Jerry
there is
Holman
a
says,
shot
yes,
out
he
there
remembers,
that
sir.
a dog
And
has
Mr. Baldwin
to have,
asked,
or
do you
even
know what she
experimental
saw
shot,
that day?
this dog has it.
Jerry Holman
If
doesn't
it's the
remember.
best of the food or beds or blankets, this
He
dog has
doesn't
it.
remember what she saw that day.
This dog is a
Once
tiny
again,
movie star.
very
Spoiled,
very
has
convenient,
a very bad attitude.
very opportunistic, very
And lives
self-serving
better than
lack
me.
of memory here.
She has the whole
And not a
room
good look.
contributed to
Because if
herself
somebody
and her
saw
mansion.
something suspicious at the end of the bridge
So,
where the girls were abducted, you as the lead investigator, you should know that like the back of your hand. You should know what that is. He doesn't remember because he discarded it because it wasn't useful to the case he was trying to make. Mr. Baldwin asked, isn't it true there was tension between the FBI and the Unified Command? This is a point he is making repeatedly. Mr. McWheeland objected to that, and that was sustained.
you know, Melissa,
The state really
You know
does
what I
not want
was
us to
thinking?
get into conflicts
Miss
in this
Higginbotham?
investigation, where they
Mr.
came from,
Higginbotham,
why they arose, what even really they were.
that maybe the photo was flipped that we're seeing, meaning they weren't coming from.
Mr. Baldwin asks him to confirm
They were on their
that
way
the
back.
last time Libby's phone connected to the network was at 5:44
The girls
on
went
June
across the
13th,
bridge.
February 13th, 5:44 p.m. Mr. McWheeland objects as a foundational question. No foundation. How does
Oh,
how
you're
does he
right,
know?
that trail, I forgot
Well,
about that.
Mr. Baldwin points out
The
he said
trail.
that in his deposition.
Well, there was two trails. There's one before the bridge.
So we offered the deposition to refresh
Right before the bridge, there's a trail that you can
There were a
take
couple
on the
times
left-hand side
where Mr. Baldwin had
that
offered
used to
his
lead all the way
deposition
around
to
to where the
refresh him,
girls were,
and he did the Sarah
And then
Carbaugh
went
thing.
like a
good.
horseshoe, not
He
a
didn't say
horseshoe,
I'm
but
good.
a
Sarah Carbaugh
boomerang.
said, "No, I'm good."
and went back up the
You
trail
don't
went
need to
back
show
up
me
to
my
the
actual words.
cemetery.
I said I don't want to.
And
I
it makes
don't want
sense
to.
because there was reports
I don't
of
want to
people
deal with
seeing
that.
someone walking
I
on
don't
that
want to
road
have
by
to
the
reconcile
cemetery,
this conflict.
which he could have came in
He
through the
said no.
bridge
Wouldn't refresh him to look at his prior testimony.
across the
I've
track
done that multiple times. This time he did.
and walked out through the
And
cemetery,
so,
or he might not even went that way. He might have.
So it's
The
there.
girls might have been on their way
a little
back.
bit of one of those
Went
courtroom
across the bridge and then came back.
moments that
Because one of the
tell you
photos,
so much about
you
this
can't see that
case.
roadblock in the beginning
Mr.
of the
Baldwin, to refresh him, you have to hand the
trail, the
document to
route
witness.
right before you get
Mr.
to
Baldwin
the
asked
bridge.
Mr. McClellan if he
there
minds
was like
if he
podiums
just
there
hands
to keep people from
a
going
small
or
part
vehicles
of the
driving on
deposition
the bridge.
because he holds it up. It's very thick. This deposition, there were two depositions apparently that they
Maybe it was.
took
Maybe he used that trail you're talking
of
about,
Lieutenant Coleman,
Higginbottom
one
Neck
in
and
August of last year and one in I think March of this year, maybe May. And the deposition
No,
transcript
look at her,
is
buddy.
like
You know, if
4
they ever
inches
give
thick.
her away, I think I might
Holds
take
it
her.
up, we all get to see it.
At one time, they were asking if I was
Mr.
interested.
McClelland then says, well, I don't have a problem with it, but I don't know why
She
you're
just heard
asking
me
me.
Open up
The
my
judge
snack
runs the courtroom.
container, Debbie.
And Judge
Debbie.
Wall, who sits there with her imperious pose at the bench for most of the day, looking down her nose, looking through her glasses at everybody, glances over at Mr. Newman and gives him a fond little smile. The judge runs the courtroom. That means you hear him say that? After being refreshed, he confirmed, yes, he did say at his deposition that the last time Libby's phone connected to the network was at 5:44 p.m. on February the 13th. And Mr. Baldwin says you can't rule out that Libby's phone left the area on the 13th and returned in the early hours of the 14th. Mr. Holman doesn't think that's what happened. He talked to the forensic guys. Doesn't think that's what happened. Mr. Baldwin points out Kelsey German's phone is never analyzed or extracted. This is interesting. This is an interesting angle. This is also a potentially dangerous angle for the defense. So I wonder where they're going here, because extracting Kelsey German's phone, it's a little bit like treating her like a suspect. And we know the hair in Abby's hand. We know they didn't run that down. Probably naturally concluded the sister isn't a suspect. But then you think about it, and is that an assumption investigators should make? Is that an assumption that they should make? It's a very dangerous implication for the defense to suggest maybe you should have treated her like a suspect. So I wonder where they're going to go with that, or if they're going to go anywhere with that. This is a precipice. Mr. Baldwin asked if they should have, if they could find something that might be of assistance, and Mr. Holman said no, he doesn't think that it was an error. Does not think that was a mistake they made to not analyze Kelsey German's phone. Mr. Baldwin gets him to concede that in his conversations, in all of the conversations about what is on the phone.
Debbie, what do you think about a fire tonight? With Sophie in front of the fire.
Is that nothing contradicts his theory that the phone was under Abby the whole time. They had previous conversations about this.
Like Sophie in front of the fire is the background.
they didn't learn until the last few months that the phone had reconnected at 4 o'clock.
So how was your birthday?
So that
Debbie,
was very recent.
did your
they
cake
learned
turn out okay?
The phone reconnected at 4 o'clock the next day.
Did you have a good dinner?
Mr. Holman said, I think I knew, I just forgot. This man has no business being a lead investigator if he can't remember. If he can't remember important details like the phone activity that he just already said in his earlier testimony, is really important for establishing the timeline, for giving us the events of the day.
Good.
But he thinks he forgot about it reconnecting the following morning after all this time, that their view was that when it lost connection to the network at 5:44 p.m., it's because the battery ran out and it turned off. And he just forgot that he knew that that wasn't true because it reconnected the following morning. By the end of this cross-examination, Lieutenant Holman was not having it. I mean, like I said, he's talking like this. He has long since abandoned the toy in the cooler, turn and give that flash, that grin at the jury. He has long abandoned that. And the few times I'm watching him kind of glance over, he's doing the glance over and look down. He doesn't maintain eye contact with these people. He's not having a good time. This did not go well. This was an absolutely terrible, terrible day for the lead investigator in the murders of Abby and Lee. Terrible day. So Mr. McLeland decided he would have a bad day too. And he got up for his redirect. So he starts by saying, I think Mr. Baldwin has mischaracterized some of the evidence, and I want to clear that up for the jury. So
I am
first,
listening to
the phone
Andrea
video
Burkhart.
was taken at
Miss Debbie
2:13,
Fox. I think you said you
right?
liked her
Yes. But Sarah
channel.
Karpov
I think she's a defense
saw
lawyer or
the
something.
bridge guy on the road
Miss
at about 4
Andrea
o'clock. So that was closer
Burkhart.
to 2 hours.
Do you know who she is?
Well, we do have to account for the time that it took the bridge guy to get from the crime scene where he was seen by Sarah Karpov.
I think it's in my title, Debbie.
But this is a gotcha. Closer to 2 hours, not 1. Closer to 2 hours. And the video shows the abduction of the girls. Yes, it does. Mr. Holman, Lieutenant Holman, he has also observed the video, and he believes the voice that you hear is Bridge Guy's. He believes that.
Delphi case.
Based on what we don't know.
I think we'll end this video in an hour.
Just
Which
that
is
that's
like
what he believes, because he's
6
decided it's one
minutes
person.
away.
Entertain
And
the
then we'll be
possibility
back
before
here
but nah.
maybe a little.
Nah, couldn't be because of that whole
Hour
prisoner's
maybe.
dilemma problem. That happens every single time. That's what happens.
With a
So
flyer.
if nobody has snitched,
Birthday.
can't be a
Happy
two-man job.
birthday flyer
It's gotta be a solo.
for our mod, Miss Debbie Fox.
Mr.
Sophie
McMillan asked,
flyer.
did you find
Sophie
anything
and
about another male
Emmett.
on the bridge that day? No.
She's out like I like the blonde lady. She is so pretty.
And Betsy and Sarah both identified the person they saw as Bridge God. Yes, we've heard all this.
I know who you're talking about.
We already know. The jury is already taking this into consideration with everything else. We don't need to hear it for the 20th time. When Mr. Baldwin asked about what Riley Voorhees and Bree Wilbur and the girls on the trail, what they had seen, or I'm sorry, when they asked Richard Allen who he had seen on the trail, he said girls. He didn't say people. Mr. Baldwin, when he asked. The point being, Betsy Blair and the girls themselves said before. Richard Allen said he sees 3. Point is the number, not the gender. But Richard Allen, it's very misleading. He saw girls, not people. Swinging hard to connect on this one. Didn't land for me. This was weak and desperate. Mr. McClelland says, and you think the sticks were there on the girls for camouflage? And he says, yes. But they may have been there for, and I couldn't hear what he said at this point. Lieutenant Holman is still speaking extremely quietly at this point in time. And so I could not quite hear what he had to say. But I was reading through on Substack. I have been following Dave Bangert. He is one of the guys who is he's one of the press guys. He's a retired journalist from Lafayette. And but he when I first met him, he wasn't able to get credentials because he's retired, so he doesn't have the necessary relationship either. I think since then he's gotten
True
on board
Crime,
with
that's
somebody
her name.
else because he has been able to get press credentials from time to time. So
Yeah,
he's been writing about this case on his Substack as well. Oh boy, I had it up and now, okay, here it is. Now we lost it. He heard that word. I didn't hear that word. I was behind Lauren, Hidden True Crime, and her crew. None of them could hear exactly what it was either. So we were all
Miss
kind
Debbie
of trying
Fox,
to figure out what this word
Miss Andrea
was.
Burkhart
It was
just
there for camouflage, but it may have been there
Hidden
for
Truth.
a something.
or Hidden True Crime.
Dave Banger reports that it could have been the sign of an undoing.
They were there together,
The word
supposedly.
was undoing, and I think that's part of why it was hard to make out, because he's being extremely quiet, and it's a strange word in that context.
Oh,
But it apparently makes sense because this is something that's come out in the course of the pretrial hearings. That the idea of an undoing is this idea that a killer or just any criminal, frankly, may do something to try to express, like it's a response to guilt or to remorse for what they have done, and so the examples of that might be things like putting the clothes back on Abby, trying to undo, like do something symbolic to undo what you did. I really don't know how the sticks would undo anything. The girls didn't have sticks on them before. You're not undoing, you're not restoring them symbolically to the way they were before you murdered
All
them.
right,
by
ladies
putting
and
sticks
gentlemen,
on
we are
them.
going to be ending this video at 1 hour. We will be back with more
So that
Sophie,
doesn't make sense to me at all. I feel like this is.
camera, and a fire.
I mean, I don't
for
know
Miss
because I
Debbie
didn't get to attend those
Fox's
hearings.
birthday. Everybody
Pastor
stop at
P
her
has sent me the
channel
transcripts, and I
and
can't wait to
say
go through
happy
them. Probably not
birthday
going to do
to
this
the
weekend.
great, beautiful
Transcripts from
Debbie
that big of an
Fox.
issue hearing. My suspicion
No,
is
you
that the
folks have a
undoing is
good
part
night.
of the
We'll be
defense
back in
theory.
an hour or so. Thank you.
Because they're saying it's ritualistic. That's ritualistic behavior. That's symbolic behavior. That's not